Hello everyone, Niklas Seidloff here. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to deploy a microservice to OpenShift on the IBM Cloud. We have created two workshops, and in this video I'm going to cover here workshop number 2. It's called Deploying Java Microservices to OpenShift on IBM Cloud. So let's take a look what's in there. We have 7 different labs. First we install the prereqs. Then in step lab number 2 and 3, we develop and build the Java microservice locally. And then there are 4 different options to deploy the microservice to OpenShift. There's also pros and cons, as you can see here. And in this video, I'm going to guide you through this lab number 4, which deploys the microservice to OpenShift using the OC CLI, the OpenShift CLI, in a very similar way as you would deploy the microservice to Kubernetes. Just before I talk about how to do it, let me show you the expected result. Okay, so from the IBM Cloud dashboard, I can open up the OpenShift web console. And in here, you can see that I already created this project called Cloud Native Starter. And that one has only one application here called Authors. That's the Java microservice. And it has a route so that I can access it externally. So this is the landing page. I can also say Open API and then UI. That opens up the Swagger or Open API Explorer. The service is really simple. The service is called Authors. It has only one endpoint called getAuthor. And in here I can see the documentation of that REST API. I can also go ahead and execute the API from here directly. So in this case, I asked for author information about myself, Niklas Seidloff, and in here I get the links to my Twitter and blog. So that's kind of what we are trying to do here in this lab. So let me go back to the OpenShift web console and delete the project now, so that in the next steps we can recreate it from scratch. Okay, so it has been marked for deletion. It will take some time, but we can go ahead and start with the actual lab. So here's the overview diagram, and it explains pretty well what we're going to do. So there are 2 parts here. We have certain things that are done on the local desktop, and then we obviously have OpenShift in the IBM Cloud. So the first thing we're going to do is to create and build a Docker image. And the way this works is that we have all the source code available here locally on our desktop. And that includes the Java implementation using OpenLiberty, MicroProfile, and OpenJ9. We also have a Docker file to build this image, but the image is not built on the desktop, but it's actually built in the cloud on OpenShift. So the way this works is we're going to start by creating a project. Then we define the build configuration, and then the actual build is done again server-side on OpenShift. And once that is done, the image is stored in the OpenShift container registry. So in difference to Kubernetes, OpenShift comes directly with a container registry that we're going to use here. So that's essentially step number 1. And step number 2 is then to actually deploy this image and to run it as a container. So in order to do that, as I said, we're going to use the OC CLI, which is very similar to the Kubernetes CLI. It has some additional functionality, for example, to expose a port so that you can access it externally. And we have the well-known YAML files here, the same ones that you would use for core Kubernetes. So in here, we define the Kubernetes resources, for example, a deployment and a service. And we apply these different YAML files, and that again creates a container and runs the container. And the container or the part is encapsulated here by the service so that other services and external requests are possible. Okay, so let's get started. So I talked about this. Now the first thing we're going to do is to create a project. Before we can create the project, we have to set up a couple of tools, and we also have to clone the repo. So in order to use tools like the OC CLI, we've actually created here another image, which is available on Docker Hub and Seidloff OpenShift Workshop Tools. And that image contains all the tools that you need. So the easiest way to get started is just by following these steps here. So first, I'm going to clone the repo. Next, I'm going to cd into that new directory. Okay, then let's go back. Next, I have to set here the root folder. This will make it easier to navigate to certain subdirectories in later steps. And then I can run the Docker container right here. And we are using a Docker volume, and that allows us to access the same files locally here, for example, from your favorite IDE, as well as from within the container. So now I'm in the container and I can cd into the mapped volume, this one here. And again, as previously, I set here the root folder. So now we have access to the OC CLI right here. Okay. And the first thing we need to do now is to log in. So in order to do that, you can navigate here to the web console and copy the login command and log in. And once that is done, you can say things like OC, who am I, just to make sure you are logged in. So that works, Niklas Heidloff. Okay, so that's good. So we are logged in, and now we can go ahead and create the project. So this is the wrong one. No, this was the right one. So I'm gonna cd here into this subdirectory. This is the subdirectory with the second workshop. And in here I can then say create a new, this one we don't need anymore. And now I can say create a new project called Cloud Native Starter, which, as probably most of you will know, maps to a Kubernetes namespace. Okay, so that's done. Now let's see what we need to do next. Next, we need to create a new build configuration, because again, the Docker build is actually done on the server. So let me copy this command here. This command creates the build configuration, and maybe just some more background here. These parameters here in this one, name, we just define the name of the application, or in our case, the microservice. Then we use here a binary build. And here's the definition of a binary build. It might be a little bit confusing, at least it was confusing to me, because we are really not uploading a binary, but we will in the next step upload the actual source code and the Docker file. Okay, so that's what we're going to use here. And then we use as build strategy Docker. And that means that we want to use our own Docker file, because that's how you would deploy existing applications or existing Kubernetes applications to OpenShift. And you have maximal flexibility because you can define whatever you like in your Docker file. Actually, before I go ahead, let me show you the Docker file. Here it is. It's very simple. It has two stages. In stage number one, the WAR file, the web application archive, is built with Maven here. And then in the second stage, I'm using here the Open Liberty image, and all I have to do is to copy two files onto it. Server XML is the server configuration, and then authors.war is the actual microservice. So then to move on, now we have created the build, and now we need to start the build. And what's important here is this last part, the dot from directory dot, which means we push all the sources from the current directory to OpenShift, basically in a temporary directory, so that the build can run there. Okay, so that takes a little bit of time. While we're waiting, I can show you what's going on here in the OpenShift web console. So here's our new project, and there is no application yet, but when we go here to builds, you can see that a new build has been created and it's actually running now. So let me switch back one more time. So yeah, the uploading has finished, and now the build is actually in progress. We can click on it to find out some more information. Here are the log files. And yeah, so looks like it's already done creating the WAR file, because this is all the output here from Maven, which you might be familiar with. And then at the end, it creates the Docker image with our WAR file. And at the very end, it pushes the image to the Docker registry in OpenShift. Okay, so let's take a look where we can see that. When I go back here to the home page, I can actually go here in this default namespace or project. And there are two applications, the Docker registry and the registry console. And the registry console is a nice little UI so that you can see everything in your Docker registry. Okay, and this one here is the one a few seconds ago that we just built. Okay, it's our project name or namespace, Cloud Native Starter, and the microservice is called authors. So that's essentially part number one. We have built the Docker image and we store it now here in the Docker registry. So let's go back and see what else. So the next steps here I just showed you live. This is just to verify that everything worked. Okay, and here we start now with the deployment of the microservice by applying the two different YAML files. And before I do that, let me show you these YAML files. So the first one uses the Kubernetes resource called deployment. And really the key thing that you define here is the name of the image. Okay, so the name of the image again is Cloud Native Starter. That's our project name plus authors. And this is the URL and port of the Docker registry within OpenShift. Plus, we also define here these two liveness probe and readiness probes, and that allows Kubernetes to check whether the service is running or not. Okay, so that's the first YAML file. The second YAML file is here called service YAML, and all that does is really to expose that service to other services or allows you to access it from external places like a web browser, and it exposes the port 3000 here. So now what we need to do is to apply these two YAML files, and in Kubernetes you would use the kube control CLI, and in here we simply use the OC CLI, which is very similar. So let's go in here and cd into the deployment directory, and this one contains the two files that I just talked about. So I can go ahead and apply now the deployment, and we can also directly apply the service YAML file. Okay, so that's done. Again, let's take a look in the UI here. We need to switch to our Cloud Native Starter project. And here's now the new deployment. It's not live yet. The circle indicates this blue indicates that it's not ready yet. We can see the progress here by opening the logs. Okay, so that's the output of OpenLiberty. And actually it should be running now because that's always the last output that you get once everything has been started. Okay, so that looks good. So let's go back. And well, it still takes some time. Oh, there it is. So now it's live. Okay, so we have created here this deployment, and we also created here the service directly, which you see here. You can also go here and only see services and deployments. But for now, this overview page is sufficient for us. Now, in order to actually test what we have deployed, we need to create a route first. And you can do it here easily in the UI. But in the workshop, we are using here the OC CLI. And in order to do that, you can say expose this service as a route. Okay, and then we can ask for the URL of that service. So we echo out the URL, and this one I can now simply copy and paste into my browser. And that again opens up the Swagger API documentation. And again, I can run this API from here directly. And as you can see, everything works. There is my information, my Twitter link and blog link again. And I think that's everything in this lab here. Yes, that's it. So that was the first option, how you can deploy a microservice to OpenShift. Check out the other videos to learn more about the other three options that we describe in this workshop. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.